My name is Caitlyn Hughes, and at 32, I never expected my carefully prepared safety report would end up in mud, literally. As a civil engineer specializing in structural analysis, I thought my expertise would be valued at the Riverside Heights project. Instead, I discovered that sometimes standing up for what is right means risking everything. The muddy report turned out to be the best career move I never planned. If you are watching this from your work desk or construction site, hit like and subscribe before I tell you how I went from being called a meddling desk jockey to running the whole operation overnight. The Riverside Heights luxury condominium project was supposed to be my big break. With my Master of Engineering from Cornell and 8 years of experience, I thought I was ready for a $50 million project. The gleaming architectural renderings showed 5 elegant towers of steel and glass overlooking the river, promising to transform the old industrial waterfront into the most coveted address in the city. On paper, it was perfect. In reality, it was where my engineering principles would be tested in ways I never imagined. My firm Turner Engineering Associates had been contracted to partner with Maxwell Construction on this massive undertaking. We were responsible for structural integrity, safety compliance, and material specifications, while Maxwell handled the actual building. It sounded like a dream collaboration, until I met Derek Maxwell, the site foreman and nephew of the company founder. From our first handshake, I sensed his resentment. Derek was a barrel-chested man in his 50s with calloused hands and 27 years of construction experience. He wore his hard hat like a crown and treated the construction site like his personal kingdom. The first time I pointed out a potential issue with the foundation specifications, he looked at me like I had suggested we build the entire complex upside down. I can still hear his dismissive tone, the way he chuckled before responding, glancing at the other men on site as if sharing a private joke. My first week, I asked about reinforcement patterns in the foundation. He smiled thinly and said, "You sure ask a lot of questions for someone who has probably never mixed concrete in her life." I maintained my professionalism. "Actually, Derek, I worked summers with my uncle who owns Hartley Construction. I have mixed plenty of concrete, but I have also studied how structural failures happen." He raised his eyebrows clearly, not expecting that answer. "Well, Miss Cornell, we have been building things that stay standing for 3 decades. Maybe trust the process before trying to reinvent it." That was just the beginning. Every suggestion was met with resistance, every question treated as an accusation. I was the outsider, the desk jockey, the woman who did not understand how things worked in the real world of construction. Not everyone on site shared Derek's attitude. Amanda Reyes, the site manager, became my ally early on. She was a straight-talking professional with 15 years in the industry who had fought her own battles for respect. "First rule here, Caitlyn, never let them see you second-guess yourself," she advised during lunch one day. "These guys can smell doubt like sharks smell blood." I also found support in Jacob Peters, a junior engineer fresh out of school who absorbed every bit of knowledge I offered. His enthusiasm reminded me of my early days before I learned how office politics could be more challenging than differential equations. Then there was Richard Maxwell, the company's CEO, and Derek, his brother-in-law. A businessman rather than a builder, he made occasional appearances on site, dressed impeccably in tailored suits that never seemed to pick up a speck of dust. He was polite but distant, clearly comfortable leaving the day-to-day operations to Derek. The construction site itself was a constantly evolving organism. Tower cranes stretched into the sky, concrete mixers rumbled across the muddy ground, and the skeletal beginnings of what would become luxury homes grew steadily upward. I loved walking the site early mornings before the full crew arrived, seeing the sunrise reflect off steel beams, feeling the potential of what we were creating. But those peaceful moments were always interrupted once work began in earnest, especially when Derek called the morning briefings. 3 weeks into the project, he created the first truly public challenge to my authority. We stood in a circle morning coffee, still warming our hands in the cool air, when Derek reviewed the day's schedule. For Tower 3 foundation work, he announced, we will be using the mix ratios as specified in the original plan, not the adjustments that came through yesterday. I stepped forward. Actually, those adjustments are necessary based on the soil composition reports. The higher clay content means we need the modified mix for proper curing and strength. Derek looked at me with exaggerated patience. "Caitlyn, we have been pouring foundations in this city for 30 years. The original mix works fine." I stood my ground. Not in this soil condition, it does not. The adjustments are minimal but critical. I could feel every eye on us. Derek smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Well, since you are so concerned, why not stay and watch us pour today? See for yourself how we handle things in the real world instead of in textbooks. That was the first public shot across the bow. I knew then that every recommendation I made would be scrutinized, challenged, or simply ignored. But I had no idea how much worse it would get, or how a muddy construction site would become the battlefield for my professional future. The other men shifted uncomfortably, some smirking, others avoiding eye contact. I realized then that gaining acceptance would be an uphill battle. But I was trained to calculate load-bearing capacities and structural integrity. I knew something about withstanding pressure. Later that day, I found Amanda organizing delivery schedules in the site office. "Is he always like this?" I asked. She looked up from her computer. "Derek, yeah, pretty much. He has got the old-school construction mentality. Women belong in the trailer doing paperwork, not telling men how to build." "How do you deal with it?" She shrugged. "I pick my battles. Prove myself with results. You will too. Just make sure when you push back, you are 100% certain you are right." I had no idea how prophetic that advice would become, or that being right would not be enough when faced with pride, stubbornness, and the weight of how things have always been done. That night, I pored over the project plans in my apartment, familiarizing myself with every detail, determined to be so thoroughly prepared that even Derek could not dismiss me. Little did I know I was about to discover something that would make our disagreement about concrete mix seem trivial by comparison. The first major red flag appeared during my third week on the project. I was reviewing the foundation plans for Tower 2 when I noticed discrepancies between the soil analysis reports and the foundation design. The site had once been industrial property, and the ground composition varied significantly across the building footprint. One section in particular showed concerning levels of soil compression under simulated load testing. Most concerning the foundation design did not account for these variations. It was a one-size-fits-all approach that might work for 3 of the 5 towers, but potentially created serious problems for Tower 2 and possibly Tower 4. I spent that entire weekend in my apartment, surrounded by technical manuals, soil reports, and my laptop running simulation after simulation. My cat Newton watched judgmentally as I skipped meals and talked to myself. By Sunday night, my concerns had only deepened. Monday morning, I arrived early to catch Amanda before the daily briefing. "I think we have a potential issue with the Tower 2 foundation design," I explained, spreading out my annotated plans on her desk. "The soil composition shows much higher clay content in this quadrant, with poor drainage characteristics. Under heavy load conditions, especially with our region, is seasonal freeze-thaw cycles, we could see differential settlement issues." Amanda frowned at the documents. "How bad are we talking?" "Worst case. Several inches of uneven settlement over the first 5 years. Enough to cause structural stress cracking and potentially compromise the building integrity." "Have you talked to Derek about this?" She asked the question I had been dreading. "Not yet. I wanted to gather comprehensive data first." "Smart," she nodded. "You will need it." I spent the next 3 weeks conducting additional tests. I consulted with Dr. Malcolm Reed, my former professor and mentor, sending him my preliminary findings. "This is concerning Caitlyn," he confirmed during our video call. "The data supports your conclusions. Have you discussed implementing deeper pilings and additional reinforcement in those sections?" "Not yet," I admitted. "There is resistance to changes that might impact the timeline or budget." Dr. Reed removed his glasses, his expression serious. "Budget concerns will seem trivial compared to the liability of structural failure. You need to make this case strongly." Armed with his encouragement, I compiled everything into a comprehensive 30-page report, complete with data visualizations, comparative case studies, and clear recommendations. I stayed up until 2 in the morning perfecting it, checking every calculation, anticipating every possible counter-argument. This would be my vindication, proof that my concerns were valid and my expertise valuable. The next morning, I caught Derek alone in the site office, hoping a private conversation would be more productive than a public confrontation. "Derek, I have completed a thorough analysis of the Tower 2 foundation issues." I began, offering him the printed report. "We need to implement these modifications before proceeding further." He barely glanced at the document. What issues the foundation design was approved months ago? The soil composition varies significantly across the building footprint. The current design does not account for these variations. He leaned back in his chair. So you are telling me that the foundation design that passed review by the city, by our engineers, and by the project architects is suddenly flawed because you 3 weeks on the job say so? I pushed the report closer to him. The data supports it. Please just review my findings. Look, Caitlyn, he sighed with exaggerated patience. We build according to approved plans. If we started changing things every time someone had a theory, we would never finish. Just do your job and let us do ours. This is my job, I insisted. Ensuring structural integrity is exactly what you hired my firm to do. He stood up, effectively ending the conversation. We hired your firm to sign off on our work, not reinvent it. Just build according to plan. I left his office clutching my report, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. That was not just dismissal. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of my role and responsibility. If Derek viewed my input as merely ceremonial, a rubber stamp for decisions already made, we had a serious problem. That evening I called Amanda. He would not even look at the report I told her. Not surprised, she replied. What are you going to do? I have to escalate this. These are not minor concerns. She paused before responding. Just be prepared. Derek has been with the company for 25 years. He coached the owner as kids in Little League. You are new, and you are challenging both his expertise and the project timeline. I know, but this is about safety and professional integrity. What would you do? Probably the same thing, she admitted. Just know what you are walking into. I spent that night drafting an email to Derek Maxwell and our project liaison at my firm, formally requesting a review meeting to address my concerns. As I typed, I wondered if I was risking my position on the project or even my job. But the alternative, staying silent about a potentially dangerous situation, was not an option. The ethical guidelines I had sworn to uphold as an engineer were clear: public safety comes first, above convenience, above budget, above personal career concerns. If that made me unpopular or even unemployed, I would have to live with it. But still, as I clicked send on that email at 11:30 that night, I could not help but wonder if there had been a better way to handle the situation. If I had somehow failed to communicate effectively or build the necessary rapport before raising alarms, the doubt kept me awake far longer than it should have. The response came at 7:15 the next morning, meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main trailer, all stakeholders to attend. Present your findings with specific recommendations. It was happening. For better or worse, I was about to put everything on the line. The morning of the meeting, I arrived an hour early to set up my presentation and calm my nerves. I had prepared a slide deck with visual representations of the data, simplified explanations of the technical issues, and clear recommendations. I rehearsed my points in front of my bathroom mirror, anticipating questions and objections. By 9:45, the meeting room in the main trailer was filling up. Derek Maxwell sat at the head of the table, scrolling through emails on his phone. Derek entered with 2 of his senior supervisors, all wearing matching scowls. My colleague Jacob slipped in and gave me an encouraging nod. Amanda arrived last, coffee in hand, and took the seat nearest the door, as if planning a quick escape if things got ugly. I was wearing my most professional outfit, a charcoal pantsuit that I reserved for client presentations. My hair was pulled back neatly, and I had applied just enough makeup to look polished, but not like I was trying too hard. In a male-dominated field, these calculations mattered whether I liked it or not. Richard began the meeting with corporate efficiency. I understand there are concerns about the Tower 2 foundation design. Caitlyn, please present your findings. Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. I began clicking to my first slide. I appreciate the opportunity to address these issues. For the next 20 minutes, I walked through my analysis, the soil composition variations, the simulation results, the potential consequences of differential settlement, and the relatively straightforward solutions of deeper pilings and reinforced foundation sections in the problematic areas. I maintained eye contact with everyone at the table, keeping my voice steady and professional. Just as I moved to my recommendations slide, Derek interrupted. This is all theoretical, he said dismissively. Your computer models do not account for real-world conditions. Actually, I countered, these models are calibrated using data from similar construction projects and soil conditions. They are quite reliable. Derek leaned forward. You are suggesting we delay the foundation pour by 2 weeks, 3, to address a problem that might never materialize. The research indicates an 87% probability of significant settlement issues within 5 years if we proceed with the current design, I replied, pointing to the relevant data. He smirked. Book smart site, stupid. No offense, but some of us have been building in this region for decades. We know it works. The tension in the room thickened. I felt my face flush, but kept my composure. Experience is valuable, Derek, but so is specialized analysis. The soil conditions in this specific location are unusual due to the former industrial use of the property. Derek looked around the table, appealing to the others. Every project has unique challenges. If we redesigned foundations every time a soil sample looked unusual, nothing would ever get built. One of Derek's supervisors, Tom, nodded vigorously. We have dealt with worse conditions than this without issues. Richard Maxwell, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Caitlyn, and what is the impact on budget and timeline? I welcomed the practical question. We need to modify the foundation design for towers 2 and 4, increasing the depth of the pilings by approximately 8 feet in these sections. I indicated on the site map and adding additional reinforcement here and here. My estimate shows a 2-week delay to the current schedule, and an additional cost of approximately $350,000. $350,000, Derek exclaimed, plus 2 weeks of crew time and equipment rental, for a theoretical problem that might never happen. Compared to the potential cost of remediation, if settlement occurs, or worse, litigation, if structural integrity is compromised. This is a minimal investment, I countered. Derek scoffed. Always the worst-case scenario with engineers. This is why projects go over budget. This is why buildings stay standing. I replied more sharply than I intended. Derek's face darkened. Are you implying my buildings are unsafe? I am stating that this particular design does not adequately account for the soil conditions at this specific site. The room fell silent. Derek glared at me, then turned to Richard. Your brother-in-law hired me to build this project on time and on budget. Every day of delay costs money. Every change order eats into profits. If we cave to every concern raised by someone who has spent more time in classrooms than on construction sites, we will never complete this project. Richard looked uncomfortable, caught between professional responsibilities and family connections. He turned to me. Have you consulted with the original engineering firm that approved these plans? I straightened my shoulders. Yes. I spoke with Dr. Reed at Cornell, who specializes in foundation engineering for problematic soil conditions. He confirmed my concerns. Derek rolled his eyes. Of course your professor agreed with you. The implication that I had somehow manipulated the expert opinion stung. Professional integrity is on the line here, I said firmly. These are not arbitrary concerns. And my professional reputation is on the line too, Derek shot back. 27 years in this business, and I have never had a structural failure. The meeting continued to deteriorate. What had begun as a technical discussion had become personal. Every point I raised was countered not with data, but with appeals to experience, tradition, or financial concerns. Even when Jacob supported my analysis, he was dismissed as being junior and inexperienced. By the end of the hour, no clear decision had been reached. Richard, clearly uncomfortable with the conflict, proposed a compromise. Let us have an independent third party review the concerns and make recommendations, he suggested. In the meantime, we will continue site preparation, but hold off on the Tower 2 foundation pour. It was better than nothing, but far from a resolution. As we filed out of the meeting room, I felt simultaneously vindicated that the foundation pour had been delayed, and frustrated that my expertise had been so thoroughly questioned. Derek caught up with me in the parking lot. Listen, Caitlyn, he said in a low voice. I do not know what you are trying to prove here, but this is my project, my crew, my reputation. If you want to work in this town after this job, you might want to think about being more of a team player. I am trying to be a responsible engineer, I replied. That is what I was hired to do. He shook his head. There is responsible, and then there is righteous. One gets buildings built, the other gets you labeled as difficult. Your choice. As he walked away, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. This had moved beyond professional disagreement. It had become a power struggle, and Derek had just made it clear that he had weapons in this fight that I did not. That evening, I called my mentor, Dr. Reed. They are bringing in a third-party reviewer, I explained. Good, he replied. An objective opinion will help. But what if they find someone who will just rubber stamp the original plans, I asked. Then you document your concerns officially in writing, cover yourself professionally. What about my career? Derek basically threatened that I would be blacklisted if I keep pushing. Dr. Reed sighed. Caitlyn, this is the hard part of engineering ethics that we discuss in theory, but hope you never face in practice. Sometimes doing the right thing has a cost. I know, I said quietly. I just did not expect it so early in my career. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. I had entered engineering to build things to create structures that would stand the test of time. I never anticipated that the greatest challenges would come, not from complex physics or material limitations, but from human stubbornness and pride. 2 days after our contentious meeting, heavy rain swept through the region. The construction site transformed into a maze of puddles and mud with workers in rain gear, stubbornly continuing non-critical tasks. Water pooled in excavations and tarps flapped in the wind over materials that needed to stay dry. I arrived around 9:30 later than usual due to flooded roads, carrying a waterproof portfolio containing my updated report. The independent reviewer had requested additional data, and I had spent the previous night refining my analysis, incorporating new comparison cases, and strengthening my recommendations. The rain had tapered to a drizzle, but the damage was done. The site was a muddy mess, with vehicles leaving deep ruts in the saturated ground. Workers moved carefully, avoiding the deeper puddles. Despite the conditions, the project continued its relentless forward march. I spotted Derek near the Tower 2 excavation, huddled under a temporary shelter, with several supervisors pointing at blueprints spread on a makeshift table. They were discussing something intensely, and I could tell from their gestures that it related to the foundation work that I had flagged as problematic. This was my chance. The independent reviewer had not yet issued findings, but if Derek was planning to proceed with the original foundation design, despite the hold order, I needed to intervene. I clutched my portfolio tighter and trudged through the mud toward the group. As I approached, I heard Derek saying, "We need to get this back on schedule. If we can get the forms in place today, we can pour early next week, weather permitting." My heart raced. He was planning to bypass the review process and proceed with the original flawed design. "Excuse me," I interrupted Derek. "You know there is a hold on the Tower 2 foundation pending the independent review." The group turned to look at me, water dripping from their hard hat brims. Derek's expression darkened when he saw me. "We are just preparing," he said flatly. "Being ready when the review clears us to proceed." I knew better. The forms and rebar configuration would be specific to the foundation design. If they installed everything according to the original plan, it would create momentum to continue with that design regardless of the review outcome. I opened my portfolio. I have updated my analysis with additional data that further confirms the need for modifications. I thought you should see it before proceeding with any preparation work. Derek looked at the other men, then back at me. The tension was palpable even in the damp air. "Are you seriously doing this again? In this weather? In front of my crew?" "The safety concerns do not go away because of rain, Derek," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "And your crew should be aware of potential issues with the design they are implementing." He stepped closer, towering over me, his voice lowered to a dangerous level. "You just will not quit, will you? Little Miss Cornell with her fancy degree, thinking she knows better than everyone who has actually built something in the real world." The other supervisors shifted uncomfortably. A few workers who had been pretending not to listen moved closer, sensing conflict. "This is not about credentials," I insisted. "It is about site-specific conditions that the original design does not address." Derek let out a harsh laugh. "You have been here, 6 weeks, and suddenly you are the authority on how we should build. You think your computer models know more than 30 years of experience." I held my ground. Experience is valuable when the conditions match past projects. But this site has unique challenges. Derek's face reddened. "You know what your problem is. You cannot admit when you are out of your depth. Women like you come into this industry thinking you need to prove something, so you create problems where none exist." The sexist comment hung in the air. Several workers looked down embarrassed. Others watched with uncomfortable fascination. "That is completely inappropriate and unprofessional," I said, struggling to keep my voice from shaking. This is about engineering standards, not gender. No, this is about you trying to make a name for yourself at the expense of my project and my timeline, he shot back. I opened the report determined to focus on facts rather than his personal attacks. Here is the additional soil analysis showing exactly why the standard foundation design is inadequate for these specific conditions. Derek stared at me for a long moment, his jaw clenched. Then in one swift motion, he grabbed the report from my hands. You know what I think of your meddling desk jockey report, he sneered. With deliberate contempt, he threw the entire document into the muddy ground at our feet. 30 pages of analysis charts and recommendations splashed into a deep puddle, instantly soaked and ruined. Mud splattered onto my boots and the hem of my pants. That is what I think of your theories, he announced loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Now, if you will excuse us, some of us have actual work to do. The silence that followed was absolute. Workers froze in place. The supervisors looked anywhere but at me. I stared at my ruined report, watching rainwater and mud seep through the pages, dissolving weeks of work. In that moment, something inside me broke. Not my resolve, but my illusion that professionalism and expertise would always be respected. I felt hot tears threatening, but I refused to cry in front of these men. Instead, I knelt down and began gathering the sodden pages, my hands trembling. No one moved to help me. No one spoke. I could feel dozens of eyes on me as I collected the muddy remains of my work. My face burned with humiliation, but also with a growing rage. When I had salvaged what I could, I stood up, straight mud staining my hands and clothes. I looked Derek directly in the eyes. This will be in my formal report to both companies, I said, my voice low but clear. Every word. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, holding the dripping remains of my report. I made it to my car before the tears came hot streams down my cold cheeks. I sat behind the wheel, shaking with a mixture of anger, humiliation, and disbelief. How had a professional disagreement descended to this level? What kind of workplace allowed such behavior? And what was I supposed to do now? I called Amanda, barely able to speak through my tears. He threw my report in the mud, I managed to say, in front of everyone. He did what she exclaimed. Wait, are you serious? I told her everything. The confrontation, the sexist comments, the deliberate humiliation. That is completely unacceptable, she said firmly. Have you called Richard? Not yet. I can barely think straight. Go home, clean up, document everything while it is fresh in your mind. Email it to yourself so it is time-stamped. Then call Richard. I followed her advice, driving home in a daze. In my apartment, I peeled off my mud-stained clothes and stood under a hot shower, letting the water wash away the physical remnants of the humiliation, while my mind raced through the implications. Should I quit, file a formal complaint, try to get transferred to another project, or just swallow my pride and find a way to work with Derek, despite everything? I thought about all the women who had come before me in engineering and construction who had faced far worse and persevered. I thought about the responsibility I had to the future occupants of Riverside Heights who would never know about the battle being fought over their safety. That evening, I called Dr. Reed again. I do not know what to do, I admitted after telling him the story. I feel like no matter what choice I make, I lose. His response was measured. Document everything he advised. And consider this if you walk away now. What message does that send, not just to Derek, but to every young engineer watching how this plays out? But my career, I protested. He has connections throughout the industry. Your career will survive this, Caitlyn. Your integrity might not survive abandoning your professional judgment when it matters most. After we hung up, I sat at my computer and wrote a detailed account of the incident, including dates, times, and witnesses. I described the technical issues that had been dismissed and the unprofessional response to my concerns. I attached salvageable portions of my report and notes on what had been destroyed. I sent it to my personal email to Dr. Reed, and after a moment his hesitation to Richard Maxwell with a request for an urgent meeting. Then I sat on my sofa, emotionally exhausted, wondering if I had just committed career suicide or taken the first step toward vindication. The uncertainty was excruciating, but beneath it all was a quiet certainty. I had done what my professional ethics required. Whatever came next, I would face it knowing that. The next morning I awoke to an unexpected email notification. It was from Richard Maxwell. His assistant marked urgent. Miss Hughes, please be advised that Eleanor Williams, lead engineer from Meridian Investments, will be conducting a surprise site inspection today at 10 a.m. Your presence is requested as the engineering liaison. Please do not inform other site personnel of this visit in advance. I read the message twice, trying to process its implications. Meridian Investments was the primary financial backer of the Riverside Heights project. I had heard the name mentioned in initial meetings but had never interacted with their representatives, and now their lead engineer was conducting a surprise inspection specifically requesting my presence. The timing seemed too coincidental to ignore. Had Richard shared my email about the mud incident, or was this routine oversight that happened to fall on the day after the confrontation? Either way, I needed to be prepared. I quickly showered and dressed in my most professional attire, a navy blue suit with minimal jewelry. I reprinted what I could of my destroyed report and organized my notes on the foundation concerns. Whatever this visit was about, I would be ready. I arrived at the site 30 minutes early, trying to appear calm despite my racing heart. The ground was still muddy from yesterday's rain, but the sun had emerged, promising a clearer day. Workers moved about their tasks with the usual construction site rhythm, unaware of the impending visit. At precisely 9:55, a sleek black Audi pulled into the visitor parking area. A woman emerged tall and imposing in a tailored charcoal suit, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a precise bun. She surveyed the construction site with the practiced eye of someone who knew exactly what she was looking at. Richard Maxwell hurried from the main office to greet her, hand extended. I watched their interaction from a distance, noting Richard's unusually deferential body language. This visitor clearly held significant power. After a brief conversation, Richard beckoned me over. I approached steadily, determined to project confidence despite my uncertainty. Miss Williams, this is Caitlyn Hughes, our structural engineering liaison from Turner Engineering. Richard introduced me. Caitlyn Eleanor Williams is the lead engineer for Meridian Investments and will be conducting a site inspection today. Eleanor Williams extended her hand. Her grip was firm, her gaze direct and evaluating. Pleased to meet you, Miss Hughes. I have heard interesting things about your work here. The ambiguity of her statement left me wondering exactly what she had heard and from whom. Thank you for coming, Mr. Williams. I will be happy to assist with your inspection. She nodded briskly. Let us begin with Tower 2. I understand there have been some discussions about the foundation design. My pulse quickened. So this was not a routine inspection after all. Somehow she knew about the disputed foundation design. As we walked toward Tower 2, I noticed Derek emerging from the site office, his expression changing from confusion to alarm when he spotted Richard with Eleanor and me. He quickly composed himself and hurried in our direction. Richard, he called out with forced joviality. I was not aware we had visitors today. Richard looked uncomfortable. Last-minute arrangement, Derek. Miss Williams from Meridian Investments wanted to see our progress. Derek's smile tightened as he extended his hand to Eleanor. Derek Maxwell, site foreman. If I had known you were coming, I would have prepared a proper tour. Eleanor accepted his handshake with cool professionalism. Surprise inspections provide a more accurate picture of day-to-day operations, Mr. Maxwell. I prefer to see things as they truly are, not as they are prepared for my benefit. Derek's smile faltered slightly. Of course. Well, I would be happy to show you around. Actually, Eleanor said I would like Miss Hughes to guide the technical aspects of this inspection given her structural engineering expertise. I fought to keep my expression neutral, as Derek's face darkened. Whatever was happening here, the power dynamics had just shifted dramatically. The inspection began at Tower 2 is excavation site. Eleanor asked pointed technical questions about soil composition, foundation design specifications, and load-bearing calculations questions that revealed her deep expertise in structural engineering. Derek struggled with many of the technical details, often deferring to me or attempting to redirect the conversation to scheduling and budget achievements. I answered each question thoroughly and professionally, never directly contradicting Derek but not holding back on the technical concerns I had documented. As we stood looking at the Tower 2 excavation, Eleanor asked directly, Miss Hughes, do you have any specific concerns about the current foundation design for this section? Derek shot me a warning glance, but Eleanor's attention was focused entirely on me. This was the moment of truth, a clear invitation to voice my concerns to someone who might actually have the authority to address them. "Yes, Miss Williams, I do," I replied steadily. "The soil composition in this quadrant shows unusual characteristics due to the previous industrial use of this property. My analysis indicates potential for differential settlement under the current design specifications, particularly with our regional freeze-thaw cycles." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "Have you prepared a report documenting these concerns?" I hesitated, acutely aware of Derek's glare. "Yes, I prepared a comprehensive analysis with recommendations for modifications to the foundation design." "May I see it?" she asked. "The original was, damaged yesterday," I replied carefully, "but I have reprinted the key sections this morning." I handed her the folder with my reprinted analysis. She reviewed it with practiced efficiency, asking clarifying questions about specific data points and calculations. "This is thorough work, Miss Hughes," she commented. "Your soil composition analysis is particularly detailed." "Thank you," I replied, feeling a surge of validation. "I believe it is critical to account for these site-specific conditions." As Eleanor continued to review my report, an unexpected connection emerged. "Did you study under Malcolm Reed at Cornell?" she asked suddenly. "Yes, I did," I confirmed, surprised. "Dr. Reed was my graduate advisor." Eleanor smiled for the first time. "Malcolm and I worked together on the Westlake Center project in Seattle 15 years ago. His attention to foundation engineering and problematic soil conditions saved that project from significant issues." My heart leaped. Eleanor Williams knew and respected my mentor. This could not be coincidence. The inspection continued for another 2 hours, covering all 5 tower locations. Throughout, Eleanor continued to direct technical questions primarily to me, while Derek grew increasingly tense, and Richard increasingly concerned. As we completed the tour, Eleanor addressed Richard directly. "Mr. Maxwell, I would like to speak privately with Miss Hughes before I leave." Richard nodded, though his expression betrayed his unease. "Of course. You can use my office." Once alone in Richard's office, Eleanor's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Caitlyn, your mentor Malcolm contacted me yesterday about this project." So that explained the timing of this visit. Dr. Reed had reached out to her after our conversation about the mud incident. "He mentioned your concerns about the foundation design," she continued, "and he also mentioned some resistance you've encountered in addressing those concerns." I took a deep breath. "Miss Williams, I believe in maintaining professional relationships even when there are technical disagreements. But yes, there have been challenges in getting my concerns taken seriously." She nodded. "Malcolm also mentioned something about a report being thrown in mud." I felt my face flush at the memory. Yesterday there was an incident. I had prepared an updated analysis of the soil conditions and foundation recommendations. When I attempted to present it to Mr. Maxwell, the site foreman, he threw it into a mud puddle on the construction site, in front of numerous workers. Eleanor's expression hardened. "That is completely unacceptable behavior in any professional context." "I agree," I said quietly. "I filed a formal complaint with Richard Maxwell yesterday evening." She studied me for a moment. "You know, Caitlyn, in my 30 years as a structural engineer, I have encountered my share of Derek Maxwells. Men who believe experience trumps analysis, who resist change and innovation, who see technical concerns as personal challenges to their authority." I nodded, grateful for her understanding. "But I have never let them compromise safety standards on my projects," she continued firmly. "Meridian Investments has $50 million in this development, and we expect professional conduct and engineering excellence from everyone involved." She tapped my report. "Your analysis is sound. The foundation design for Towers 2 and 4 needs modification before proceeding. I will be making that very clear to Richard Maxwell before I leave today." Relief washed over me. Finally, someone with the authority and expertise to validate my concerns and demand action. "Thank you, Miss Williams," I said sincerely. "I appreciate your taking the time to review this personally." She smiled slightly. "Call me Eleanor. And thank Malcolm for the heads up. We engineering women need to look out for each other in this industry." As we left Richard's office, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and apprehension. The technical battle might be won, but the professional fallout was just beginning. Eleanor requested an immediate meeting with Richard and Derek, along with representatives from my engineering firm who were called in on short notice. We gathered in the main conference room, the tension palpable as everyone took their seats. Richard sat at the head of the table, visibly uncomfortable. Derek positioned himself at Richard, his right hand his expression, a carefully controlled mask. Eleanor took the seat directly opposite Richard with me beside her. The power arrangement of the seating was not lost on anyone present. Gentleman, Eleanor began without preamble. I have completed my inspection of the Riverside Heights project, with particular attention to the foundation concerns raised by Miss Hughes regarding Towers 2 and 4. She placed my report on the table. After reviewing the soil analysis data and structural calculations, I concur with Miss Hughes' assessment. The current foundation design is inadequate for the specific soil conditions in those sections. Derek started to interrupt, but Eleanor continued smoothly. Meridian Investments requires these issues to be addressed before we release the next phase of funding. I recommend implementing Miss Hughes' proposed modifications to the foundation design with deeper pilings and additional reinforcement in the affected areas. Richard paled slightly at the mention of funding. Of course, Miss Williams. We take these concerns very seriously. Derek could no longer contain himself. With all due respect, we have been building in this region for 27 years. These theoretical concerns are overblown and will unnecessarily delay the project by weeks. Eleanor fixed him with a cool stare. Mr. Maxwell, differential settlement is not theoretical. It is a well-documented phenomenon in structures built on variable soil conditions. The data Miss Hughes has compiled is compelling and conforms to industry best practices. Derek shifted tactics. The modifications will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and delay completion of those towers. Eleanor nodded. Yes, approximately $350,000 in 2 weeks, according to Miss Hughes' estimates, which is considerably less than the millions it would cost to address structural issues after construction, not to mention potential liability. Richard cleared his throat. We will implement the recommended modifications immediately. Derek turned to him, betrayal evident in his expression. Richard, we cannot just. Richard cut him off with a sharp gesture. The decision is made, Derek. Eleanor was not finished. There is another matter we need to address. I understand there was an incident yesterday involving Miss Hughes' report being destroyed. The room fell silent. Derek, his face flushed dark red. Richard looked genuinely confused. I received an email about this, but I had not yet had time to investigate. What exactly happened? Before I could speak, Eleanor responded. According to multiple witnesses, Mr. Maxwell took Miss Hughes' technical report and deliberately threw it into a mud puddle on the construction site in full view of the crew. Richard's expression shifted from confusion to shock. Derek, is this true? Derek straightened defensively. It was not like that. We were having a heated discussion about project delays and things got out of hand. So, you did destroy her report, Richard pressed. I may have dropped it, Derek admitted reluctantly, in the heat of the moment. But she was undermining my authority with the crew, questioning decisions that had already been finalized. Eleanor leaned forward. Mr. Maxwell, professional disagreements are part of any complex project, but destroying a colleague is work and publicly humiliating them is never acceptable. At Meridian, such behavior would result in immediate termination. The implicit threat hung in the air. Richard looked increasingly uncomfortable, caught between his brother-in-law and his primary investor. Derek, sensing his position weakening, changed tactics. Look, maybe I lost my temper. But Caitlyn has been difficult from day one, constantly second-guessing decisions, creating problems where none exist. I had remained silent, determined to let my work and Eleanor's support speak for me, but this direct attack required a response. I have only raised legitimate engineering concerns backed by data and analysis, I said firmly. My job is to ensure structural integrity and safety, not to rubber-stamp decisions that compromise those standards. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Then she delivered the bombshell. Gentlemen, Meridian Investments cannot continue to fund a project where professional standards are compromised and technical expertise is disregarded. We require changes to the project management structure before releasing additional funds. Richard paled visibly. What exactly are you suggesting, Miss Williams? Eleanor was direct. We require a project lead who understands and respects the engineering complexities of this development, someone who can integrate technical requirements with construction realities. All eyes turned to me as the implication became clear. Richard looked stunned. You want Caitlyn to take over the project? Eleanor nodded. Miss Hughes has demonstrated both technical expertise and professional integrity under difficult circumstances. Those are precisely the qualities needed to bring this project to successful completion. Derek exploded. This is absurd. She has been here 6 weeks. I have 27 years of experience. Eleanor remained calm. Experience is valuable, Mr. Maxwell, but so is current technical knowledge and the ability to adapt to site-specific challenges. This is a setup, Derek snarled, turning to me. You engineered this whole thing, didn't you? Crying to your professor who called his friend to come rescue you. I maintained my composure. I raised legitimate safety concerns through proper channels. When those were ignored, yes, I consulted my mentor for professional guidance as any responsible engineer would. Richard, now visibly stressed, intervened. Derek, that is enough. Then Derek played his final card. She does not have construction management experience. The crews won't respect her authority. This project will fall apart under her leadership. Eleanor had anticipated this objection. Miss Hughes would work alongside an experienced construction manager, she clarified. Someone like Amanda Reyes, perhaps. The focus would be on collaborative leadership that respects both engineering requirements and construction realities. The mention of Amanda, who had years of respected site management experience, neutralized Derek, his last substantive argument. Richard, recognizing the gravity of the situation, called for a brief recess to consult privately with his executive team. Derek stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Left alone with Eleanor, I finally asked the question that had been burning in my mind. Why are you doing this? I asked quietly. You could have simply mandated the foundation changes without involving yourself in the management structure. Eleanor smiled slightly. 3 reasons. First, the foundation issue is likely just the tip of the iceberg. If that problem was being ignored, others probably are too. Second, Meridian values long-term relationships with talented engineers, and you have impressed me. And third, she added with a hint of satisfaction, I have encountered too many Derek Maxwells in my career to let this one continue unchecked. When Richard returned 30 minutes later, his decision was clear from his expression. Miss Williams, he began formally after consultation with our executive team, we agree to your conditions. We will implement the foundation modifications as specified, and we propose a new project leadership structure with Caitlyn Hughes as lead engineer and Amanda Reyes as construction manager, effective immediately. Eleanor nodded, satisfied. Excellent. Meridian will release the next funding phase as scheduled, contingent on these changes being implemented by end of day tomorrow. As the meeting concluded, Richard asked me to stay behind. Once we were alone, he spoke candidly. This is not how I anticipated this project progressing, Caitlyn, he admitted. But Miss Williams's confidence in you is significant. Are you prepared to take on this level of responsibility? I considered the question seriously. This would not be easy. There would be resistance from Derek's loyalist, challenges to my authority, and the inherent pressure of leading a $50 million project. But in that moment, I thought of all the women engineers who had faced similar barriers and persevered. I thought of Eleanor Williams and her 3 decades of breaking ground in a male-dominated field. I thought of the future residents of Riverside Heights, who deserved a safely constructed home. Yes, Mr. Maxwell, I responded with confidence I was still growing into. I am prepared to lead this project with Amanda's partnership and your support. He nodded, resigned but professional. Then I will announce the changes tomorrow morning. Derek will be reassigned to another project. You should prepare to address the team. As I left the trailer that afternoon, the weight of what had just happened began to sink in. In the span of 24 hours, I had gone from gathering my mud-soaked report in humiliation to being appointed project lead on one of the largest developments in the city. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time since joining the project, I felt that engineering excellence and professional integrity might actually prevail. That was worth whatever difficulties awaited me. The morning after the leadership change announcement was one of the most challenging of my career. I stood before the assembled construction team, conscious of the skeptical looks, the crossed arms, and the whispered comments. These were Derek's people, many of whom had witnessed his public humiliation of me just days earlier. Now I was supposed to lead them. Amanda stood beside me, a steady presence that lent credibility to my new position. She knew the crew had their respect, and her willingness to partner with me spoke volumes. I know many of you are surprised by this change. I began, my voice stronger than I felt, and I know some of you have concerns about my experience or my vision for this project. A few nodded in acknowledgement of this understatement. I am not here to reinvent how we build, I continued. I am here to ensure we build correctly for this specific site with its unique challenges. My goal is to deliver a project we can all be proud of, that stands the test of time, and that reflects the skilled craftsmanship of everyone here. I outlined my immediate plans, implementing the foundation modifications for Towers 2 and 4, revising the project schedule to minimize delays, and establishing clearer communication channels between the engineering and construction teams. I will be on site every day, available to discuss concerns and answer questions, I promised. This is a partnership. Your experience and expertise are invaluable, and I respect that. All I ask is that you give me the same opportunity to demonstrate mine. The response was mixed. Some, particularly those who had witnessed Derek's treatment of me, seemed willing to give me a chance. Others remained visibly skeptical. A few Derek's closest allies requested transfers to other projects, which Richard Maxwell reluctantly approved. Those first weeks were a baptism by fire. I arrived before dawn and left after dark, immersing myself in every aspect of the project. I learned the names of every crew member, studied their workflows, and found ways to implement the necessary engineering changes with minimal disruption to their established routines. Jacob, my junior engineer colleague, became an essential bridge between the engineering requirements and the construction realities. His enthusiasm and willingness to get his hands dirty earned the respect of the crew in ways my credentials alone could not. The foundation modifications for Towers 2 and 4 proceeded on schedule. I was on site for every major pour, inspecting the deeper pilings and reinforced sections personally. When the first tower foundation was completed, according to the new specifications on time, and within the revised budget, it marked a turning point in how the crew viewed my leadership. Tom, one of Derek's former supervisors who had initially been among the most resistant, approached me one afternoon as we were reviewing the completed foundation. "You were right about the soil conditions," he admitted gruffly. "This design makes more sense for this section." Coming from him, this was high praise indeed. "Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that." He shrugged. "Derek is not a bad builder. He is just set in his ways, too proud to admit when someone else might know something he does not." I nodded, refusing to criticize Derek even now. Experience is valuable, but so is being open to new approaches when conditions warrant it. Word came that Derek had taken a position with a smaller construction company across town. I felt no satisfaction in his departure, only a hope that he might reflect on the experience and grow from it. As the months passed, the Riverside Heights project began to take shape. The tower structures rose steadily from their foundations, steel and concrete transforming architectural renderings into physical reality. Each successful milestone further cemented my position as project lead, and the team's acceptance of my authority. There were challenges, of course. Budget pressures, weather delays, supply chain issues, the usual obstacles any major construction project faces. But with each problem solved, with each deadline met, my confidence grew, as did the team's trust in my leadership. Eleanor Williams visited the site quarterly, each time nodding with approval at our progress. During her third visit, as we stood looking at the nearly completed exterior of Tower 1, she made an observation that caught me by surprise. "You know, Caitlyn, when Malcolm called me about your situation, I was already familiar with your name." I looked at her, puzzled. "You were?" She smiled. "I make it a point to follow promising female engineers. Your graduate thesis on adaptive foundation design for climate change impacts was impressive. I had flagged you as someone to watch." I was stunned. Eleanor Williams, one of the most respected structural engineers in the country, had been aware of my work before this project. "Do not look so surprised," she chuckled. "Those of us who blaze these trails keep an eye out for those coming behind us. Your talent was evident. You just needed the right opportunity to demonstrate it." 18 months after that rainy day when my report ended up in the mud, we celebrated the completion of Riverside Heights. All 5 towers stood gleaming against the sky, on schedule and under the revised budget. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Richard Maxwell publicly credited the project's success to the leadership team of Caitlyn Hughes and Amanda Reyes. In the years since, I have led increasingly complex projects, building a reputation for technical excellence and collaborative leadership. I make it a point to mentor young engineers, particularly women, entering the field sharing not just technical knowledge but strategies for navigating the still predominantly male construction world. The mud incident, as painful as it was in the moment, taught me lessons no engineering course ever could. It showed me that technical knowledge alone is insufficient without the courage to stand by it when challenged. It demonstrated that professional integrity sometimes comes with a cost, but also with unexpected rewards. Most importantly, it taught me that true leadership is not about titles or authority, but about earning respect through competence, consistency, and character. For those of you facing your own challenges in male-dominated fields, remember this. Your expertise is valid. Your voice matters. And sometimes what feels like your lowest professional moment can become the foundation for your greatest success. Have you ever had to stand your ground professionally when your expertise was questioned? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And do not forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the muddy moments in our careers turn out to be the most fertile ground for growth. Thank you for listening, and until next time, build your life and career on solid foundations.